Chairman, on behalf of the Academic Board, in recognition of her contribution to ageing research in its broadest sense, I have much pleasure in presenting to you Elizabeth Mills to receive the honorary degree of Doctor of Science of the University of Brighton.
Elizabeth Mills, in recognition of your major contribution to ageing research and leadership in the voluntary sector, I confer upon you the honorary degree of Doctor of Science of the University of Brighton. I now have pleasure in asking Elizabeth Mills to address the audience.
Wow, that was something, wasn't it? Deputy Chairman, Vice-Chancellor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Professor Farragher, for your generous words, and to the University of Brighton for the honour you are conferring on me today. But most important, congratulations to the new graduates today. It's really exciting to be here with you and to help to celebrate this very important day for the next stage of your own lives and your careers. As he mentioned, in preparing for this afternoon, I told Professor Farragher to ensure that whatever he said, he didn't make it sound as if that he was speaking about me as if I was dead, was actually talking at my funeral. Well, I'm not dead yet, and although considerably older than a good number of you today, there is also quite a lot of life left in this old body. Cast your bread upon the waters, and it'll come back as sandwiches. The more you give to others, the more you will gain for yourselves. Volunteering has been central to my life since I was probably about 7, I think, helping at the local village flower show, organising the children's miniature garden competition. That was the beginning of a lifetime of volunteering, which has contributed not only to a successful career, but to a great deal of satisfaction. I've been a Samaritan, receiving calls from the depressed and suicidal. I've been a prison visitor, as Richard said, I still am. I've been a school governor in both the public and the private sectors. I've been a trustee of several charities. And the one thing all these have in common is that I have gained a great deal more than I have given. In fact, the bread I cast on the waters has come back as very fat sandwiches. I'm sure that many of you who've been involved in the Community University Partnership Programme, CUP, here at Brighton, will share that sense of satisfaction. I read with awe about all the work that CUP does, and congratulations on the wonderful achievement of 10 years celebrated a couple of weeks ago that the Vice-Chancellor mentioned. To enlighten those guests and those who are new to the programme, CUP finds volunteers or trustees for local community projects. One project that really struck me is called Work, Write, Live, Sharing Life Stories. Residents of a local care home shared their memories with University of Brighton students. Older people's life stories are the bedrock of the scientific study of old age, gerontology. Probably without realizing it, all the participants in the Work, Write, Live project were gerontologists for a little while. Bringing young and old together like that has always been a passion of mine. And you heard Professor Farragher speaking about home share, which I've been involved with for the last 10 years, promoting the concept of the exchange of housing for help. Such a good example of intergenerational solidarity and a practical way in which individuals can make a real difference to one another's lives. Although younger people, the home sharers, go into the arrangement expecting to be the one doing the giving, surprising benefits arise. Thinking for a moment of the young woman who was studying history of art, who suddenly found she was sharing the home of a retired professor of history of art who'd had a stroke and had lost the power of speech. Never was there greater incentive to help that householder to regain her speech, because, of course, the home sharer then learned an enormous amount and got a first. What about the jazz fan who ended up as the home sharer for the late lamented George Melly? Her job was to make sure George got back from the nightclubs safely and in one piece, usually absolutely drunk as you're likely to be. So you should try it. It's a great way to start the lifelong pattern of volunteering that I'm advocating. And the home share program here in Brighton and Hove is run by Crossroads Care. So do get in touch if you're interested. Professor Farragher referred to the ageing of the population being a triumph. And certainly getting older beats the alternative. Think about it for a moment. It has resulted in an increasing number of older people needing health care, social services support, and financial help. And this is a major societal challenge. It means that all of you must be willing to be gerontologists as you go about your daily work. Everyone, irrespective of their discipline, should be thinking, how would an older person respond to this development, to this new technology, to this new design, to this service? In other words, all of you should be gerontologists for 15 minutes a day. By including older people, including people living with disabilities, you will include everybody. But if you design for the young, the trendy, and the fit, you will exclude a substantial minority of our society. When my dad was still alive, in the 1990s, now he was born in 1912, in the few weeks between Scott's ill-fated Terra Nova expedition to the South Pole and the sinking of the Titanic. We were amazed that he still managed to visit us when he was well into his 80s in London without help. He got on the train in Farnham and he got off at Clapham Junction, where he had to change trains. Bear with me, it's worth listening to. It all sounds really simple, but invariably, after making his way to the correct platform, just a few minutes before the connecting train arrived, a platform change would be announced over the tannoy. This change inevitably meant that he would have to make the long climb back up to the bridge, along the corridor, and back down another set of steps. And inevitably, he missed his train. Clearly, the people who were responsible for platform allocation at Clapham Junction hadn't a clue about what it would be like for a frail older man to use their station. They should have been gerontologists for 15 minutes a day. Research into Aging, the charity which has already been mentioned, was an important organization, and a friend of mine recently reminded me that investing in medical research of any kind is a leap of faith. The faith that health and well-being can be improved, the faith that medical research holds the key to that improvement, and the faith that academic researchers working alongside patients, carers, and clinicians can and will make a difference. So my story of joining Research into Aging began in the mid-80s when, on my return from Hong Kong, I became a temp with the British Foundation for Aged Research, as it was then called. It was a tiny, unknown charity tucked into the top of an ancient building in the City of London. Those were the days when you measured the significance of a charity by the retiring military rank of its chief executive. So the big cancer charities, they were headed up by major generals, and Help the Aged at that time was run by a brigadier. Our charity, well, that was a retired major. We were a major charity. I used to joke that if we were as powerful as our friends, we would have been the biggest charity in the world. With only a staff team of 2.5 and several volunteers and a turnover of £100,000, we had the Queen Mother on our letterhead and Mr. Edmund de Rothschild as our chairman. I would have quite liked to have had some of his money as well. That turnover of about 100,000 a year resulted in our being able to choose 2 or 3, maybe 4 biomedical research projects to support each year. It's pretty small fry. But over the next few years, I learned that it was possible to do amazing things with very little money, and so the charity developed and grew. And we started to fund some fantastic research projects looking at some of the causes of ill health associated with old age, loss of vision, incontinence, loss of mobility, dementia, and so on, as well as the underlying biological aging process itself. We also learned how to punch above our weight by recruiting help at the very top. The then science minister in 1995, Ian Taylor, was introduced to us by a friend of the charity, and we gave him the germ of an idea which turned into Equal, Extend Quality Active Life, which was an initiative which informed the research councils pretty much continuously for the subsequent decade. By the time I merged research into aging with Help the Aged in 2001, the turnover had grown to 2.5 million, and we had a staff team of about 14, supported by 25 volunteers. So it's quite a transformation in a relatively short period of time. But recruiting the volunteers was always such a challenge. The ones you really want are usually the last ones to step forward. It's incredibly difficult to winkle them out and to persuade them to join you and to find appropriate roles. But my experience has shown that the cause is almost always less important than the relationship between the person doing the asking and the one who's being approached. So think for a moment. If you really admire somebody, if you like their style, you enjoy their company, you think they're something just a bit special, you're likely to accept an invitation to go to the pub, go out for a meal, see a film, or whatever. Well, the same applies to volunteering. When Jacqueline Stokes asked me to advise her and help her to set up a charity to provide auditory verbal therapy for deaf babies and young children, to enable them to listen and speak alongside their hearing peers, I said, but what do I know about children? I've never had any. The 0 to 5s, good heavens, they're babies. I've never worked in a children's charity. I really don't know anything about deafness. But I really admire Jacqueline, and it didn't take long for me to be inspired by her and to become passionate about her cause. How could I resist? Well, anyway, I didn't, and I'm still a trustee of Auditory Verbal UK nearly 10 years later. Richard mentioned bulldogs. Yeah, I nearly brought Roddy with me today, but it's a bit hot for the journey, I think. And anyway, I'm not sure that there's room on the top table for him. Roddy the bulldog from Bulldog Rescue. My husband has always been passionate about bulldogs, and when we adopted our first, I asked the director of Bulldog Rescue whether we could give a bit extra by gift aid to help swell their coffers. And she said, oh no, she said, Bulldog Rescue isn't a registered charity. There's too much hassle, too much hard work, too administratively cumbersome. Anyway, I'm not going to take any instructions from anybody else. And I heard myself say, in a kind of out-of-body experience, it isn't a hassle. It's not too much work. In fact, I'll do it for you. So I did. More accurately, I called in a favour from one of Britain's leading charity lawyers who volunteered her services. And now Bulldog Rescue is a national registered charity with 3 paid staff, a regular charitable income of over $60,000 a year, and a network of 55 volunteers covering the entire country. I'm delighted to tell you that the Brighton volunteer for Bulldog Rescue is here as my guest today. I've talked about my voluntary work, about the need to commit to help other people, and the enormous benefit that that provides. And I've talked about my commitment to the well-being of older people. I've spent most of my life trying to persuade people to help one or other of my causes. Cast your bread on the water, and it will come back as sandwiches. And today, the sandwiches are very generously filled. I really can't think of anything more generous than being awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of Brighton, especially as it's the first degree I've ever received.